Stop whatever you are doing, because what you are about to hear is not a theoretical vulnerability assessment, not a red team exercise that exposed hypothetical weaknesses, and not the kind of security breach that gets quietly patched and classified without public disclosure. Tonight, United States Central Command has confirmed through internal investigation what Middle Eastern intelligence services have been reporting for the past 72 hours. Iranian Special Operations Forces successfully infiltrated a critical American military installation in the Persian Gulf region, remained undetected on base for a period of time sufficient to collect intelligence on base layout and security procedures, and exfiltrated without being apprehended or even identified until after forensic analysis revealed the breach had occurred. The installation that was penetrated has not been officially identified in public statements, but multiple intelligence sources and regional media reports indicate the compromised facility is Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, which serves as the forward headquarters for United States Central Command Air Operations and hosts approximately 10,000 American military personnel, along with extensive intelligence collection and command and control infrastructure that coordinates air operations across the entire Middle East theater. The base is supposed to be one of the most secure American military facilities outside the continental United States, protected by multiple layers of physical security, biometric access control, continuous surveillance, and partnership with Qatari security forces that provide external perimeter defense. The consequences for the officers responsible for base security have been immediate and severe. 4 general officers have been relieved of command and recalled to the United States for investigation, including the installation commander who held direct responsibility for base security, the intelligence director who managed threat assessment and counterintelligence operations, the operations director who oversaw security force deployments and emergency response protocols, and the regional commander who exercised supervisory authority over security standards across all CENTCOM installations. The simultaneous relief of 4 flag officers represents one of the largest single accountability actions in recent U.S. military history and reflects institutional recognition that the security failure was not a tactical error by junior personnel, but a systematic breakdown in leadership threat assessment and security architecture at the highest command levels. This is not merely the story of a security breach at a military installation. This is the story of how Iranian Special Operations Forces have achieved infiltration capabilities that render perimeter security and access control measures inadequate when adversaries are willing to invest the time and resources to study vulnerabilities and exploit gaps. This is the story of how American base security doctrine, designed to prevent vehicle-borne explosives and armed assault, has proven incapable of detecting highly trained operatives conducting intelligence collection rather than kinetic attack. And this is the story of how the entire foundation of American forward military presence in contested regions rests on assumptions about base security that an adversary has just demonstrated are fundamentally invalid. If this channel has been showing you the operational realities that official statements conceal, the vulnerabilities that institutions deny until they are catastrophically exposed, and the human and systematic failures that create conditions for adversary success, now is the moment to make sure you never miss an analysis. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video with everyone in your network who understands that security is not what officials claim it is, but what adversaries prove it to be when they decide to test it. Tonight's analysis takes you inside every dimension of this catastrophic breach. The actual methodology that Iranian commandos employed to penetrate base security, reconstructed from forensic evidence and intelligence reporting on Iranian special operations training and doctrine. The timeline from initial infiltration to exfiltration, and the period of time during which hostile forces were operating inside a secure American military installation without detection. The intelligence collection objectives that the operation was designed to achieve, and what Iranian forces now know about American-based security procedures, force disposition, and operational patterns. The institutional failures that allowed security gaps to exist and to remain unidentified until adversary action exploited them. and the strategic implications for American military posture across the Middle East when adversaries have demonstrated that American bases are penetrable by forces conducting intelligence operations rather than kinetic attacks, and when the deterrence value of forward presence is undermined by vulnerability to collection operations that map the infrastructure and procedures that would be targeted in any actual conflict. The Iranian Special Operations Unit that conducted this infiltration belongs to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force, which is the external operations branch of the IRGC responsible for operations outside Iranian territory, including support to proxy forces, direct action missions against adversary targets, and intelligence collection operations in denied areas. The Quds Force has been conducting reconnaissance and intelligence collection operations against American military facilities throughout the Middle East for more than 2 decades, building detailed intelligence databases about base layouts, security procedures, and operational patterns that would be exploited in any conflict scenario. The specific unit involved in the Al Udeid infiltration is assessed to be from the Quds Force Special Operations Division, which maintains highly trained teams specialized in covert entry, intelligence collection, and operations in hostile or denied environments. These operators receive training comparable to American Special Operations Forces, including advanced fieldcraft, surveillance techniques, communication security, weapons proficiency, and the cultural and linguistic skills necessary to operate in foreign environments without detection. The selection and training pipeline for these units is extremely rigorous, with acceptance rates below 5% and training courses lasting 18 to 24 months before operators are considered mission qualified. The operational planning for an infiltration of this complexity would have required months of preparation, including detailed intelligence collection on the target facility, development of cover identities, and documentation that would allow operatives to gain access, rehearsal of the infiltration and exfiltration procedures, and establishment of support infrastructure to facilitate the operation. The level of detail required to successfully penetrate a secure military installation suggests that Iranian intelligence had access to information about base security procedures, shift change timings, access control protocols, and security force deployment patterns that could only have been obtained through either technical collection against base communications or through human intelligence sources with access to security planning information. The infiltration methodology that forensic analysis suggests was employed involved the operatives gaining access to the base using forged credentials that identified them as third-country national contractors performing maintenance or construction work at the facility. Al Udeid Air Base hosts thousands of civilian contractors from dozens of countries who perform facility maintenance, construction, food service, and other support functions that allow military personnel to focus on operational missions. The contractor workforce creates inherent security challenges because the volume of personnel moving through access control points makes detailed verification of every individual impractical, and because contractors often work in areas throughout the base that would allow observation of security procedures and operational activities. The forged credentials that the Iranian operatives used were sophisticated enough to pass initial screening at base access control points, including biometric data that either was falsified using advanced techniques or was obtained from legitimate contractors whose identities were compromised through theft or coercion. The creation of credentials with valid biometric data suggests either that Iranian intelligence services have penetrated the databases where legitimate contractor information is stored, or that they have access to biometric spoofing technology that can defeat the fingerprint and facial recognition systems used for access control. If you want analysis this detailed, this willing to examine how sophisticated adversaries defeat security systems that institutions assure you are impenetrable, this willing to show you the gap between security theater and actual security when tested by determined professionals. Subscribe now to ensure you never miss an update as the vulnerabilities in American forward military posture continue to be exposed by adversaries who study weaknesses while defenders assume strength. The timeline of the infiltration operation can be partially reconstructed from security camera footage that was reviewed during the forensic investigation and from pattern analysis of access control logs that identified anomalies in contractor movement within the facility. The operatives entered the base through the main contractor access point at approximately 06:30 local time on a morning when contractor traffic was heavy due to multiple construction and maintenance projects occurring simultaneously across different areas of the installation. The high volume of contractor movement provided concealment in numbers, making it less likely that individual contractors would receive detailed scrutiny. Once inside the base perimeter, the operatives proceeded to areas where their supposed work assignments would provide legitimate reason for presence, but deviated from those areas to conduct reconnaissance of facilities and infrastructure that were not part of any legitimate contractor work scope. Security camera footage shows individuals matching the physical descriptions of the suspected Iranian operatives in proximity to sensitive facilities, including communications buildings, aircraft maintenance hangars, and fuel storage areas during periods when no authorized contractor work was scheduled in those locations. The duration of time that the operatives remained on base is assessed to be approximately 8 to 11 hours, spanning from morning entry through early evening exfiltration. This extended presence provided sufficient time to conduct detailed observation of security patrol patterns, to photograph or video record facility layouts and access points, to observe aircraft movements and maintenance procedures, and potentially to emplace technical collection devices that could continue gathering information after the operatives departed. The exfiltration was conducted using the same contractor credentials that facilitated entry, with the operatives departing through contractor access points during the evening shift change when outbound contractor traffic was again at high volume. So why may you say that is during then? The access control systems recorded their departure, but because their presence had not been identified as suspicious, the departure triggered no alerts or additional screening. It was only during the subsequent forensic investigation, conducted after intelligence reporting suggested that a penetration had occurred, that analysts identified the access control records associated with the suspected operatives and began reconstructing their movements within the facility. The intelligence collection objectives that this operation was designed to achieve can be inferred from the areas of the base where the operatives were observed and from the standard intelligence requirements that would guide any Iranian reconnaissance of American military facilities. The primary objectives almost certainly included mapping of base layout and security infrastructure, identification of critical nodes including command and control facilities and communication centers, observation of security force procedures and response times, and collection of information about aircraft types and numbers present at the facility. The secondary objectives likely included identification of security vulnerabilities that could be exploited in future operations, either for additional intelligence collection or for kinetic attacks. These vulnerabilities might include gaps in security camera coverage where penetrations could occur unobserved, weaknesses in access control procedures that could be exploited to gain entry or to move between restricted areas, patterns in security patrol routes and timing that create predictable gaps in coverage, and physical security weaknesses in perimeter barriers or building access points that could be breached. The tertiary objectives potentially included placement of technical collection devices that could provide continuous intelligence after the operatives departed. These devices might include miniature cameras with wireless transmission capability positioned to observe sensitive areas, IMSI catchers that collect mobile device identifiers and communications metadata from base personnel, or network access devices that could exploit vulnerabilities in base information systems to enable remote access. The forensic investigation is attempting to identify whether any such devices were emplaced, but the challenge of searching a facility the size of Al-Udeid for small technical devices that are designed to be concealed is immense. The institutional failures that allowed this penetration to succeed operated at multiple levels and involved both systematic security architecture weaknesses and specific procedural failures in access control and surveillance. The fundamental security architecture challenge is that large American military installations designed to support thousands of personnel and extensive operational activity cannot function as closed fortresses with no external access. The installations require continuous movement of supplies, equipment, and personnel, including civilian contractors who perform essential support functions. This operational requirement creates inherent vulnerability because the volume of authorized access makes detailed verification of every individual impractical. The specific procedural failures involved inadequate verification of contractor credentials and insufficient surveillance of contractor activities once they were inside the base perimeter. The access control procedures relied primarily on document and biometric verification at entry points but did not include continuous tracking or supervision of contractor movements once inside the facility. Contractors were assumed to proceed to their authorized work locations and to remain in those areas, but no systematic verification occurred to ensure this assumption was valid. This verification gap created the opportunity for operatives with apparently valid credentials to move throughout the facility without triggering suspicion. The surveillance system failures involved both inadequate camera coverage and insufficient analytical resources dedicated to real-time monitoring of security camera feeds. The base security camera system has extensive coverage, but gaps exist in certain areas due to budget constraints, competing priorities, and the physical challenges of providing complete coverage of a facility that covers several square kilometers. The areas where the Iranian operatives were observed included locations where camera coverage was limited or where camera angles did not provide clear identification of individuals or activities. The analytical resource constraints meant that the security camera feeds were recorded for forensic review, but were not continuously monitored in real time by personnel who could identify suspicious behavior and trigger immediate response. The security force manning levels do not provide sufficient personnel to conduct continuous real-time monitoring of all camera feeds, meaning the surveillance system functions primarily as a forensic tool for after-action investigation rather than as a real-time intrusion detection system. This limitation creates a time gap between when suspicious activity occurs and when it is identified, allowing intruders to complete their missions and depart before their presence is detected. The counterintelligence failures involved inadequate threat assessment and insufficient prioritization of the insider threat posed by contractor personnel with access to the installation. The counterintelligence focus at the base emphasized force protection against external attack threats, including vehicle-borne explosives and indirect fire, but devoted inadequate resources to detecting and preventing intelligence collection operations conducted by adversaries posing as legitimate contractors or base personnel. This prioritization reflected institutional assessment that kinetic attack was the primary threat, while intelligence collection was a secondary concern that did not warrant equivalent resource allocation. The command accountability dimension of this failure is reflected in the relief of 4 general officers who held responsibility for different aspects of base security and operations. The installation commander bore ultimate responsibility for all security matters at Al Udeid and is accountable for the systematic failures that allowed the penetration to succeed. The intelligence director failed to provide adequate threat warning about Iranian intelligence collection operations and failed to identify the specific vulnerabilities that the operation exploited. The operations director failed to ensure that security force procedures and surveillance systems were adequate to detect and prevent infiltration. The regional commander failed to establish and enforce security standards across CENTCOM installations that would have prevented these vulnerabilities from existing. The relief of these officers serves multiple institutional purposes beyond individual accountability. It signals to the force that security failures of this magnitude will result in career-ending consequences for senior leaders regardless of their previous performance or political connections. It provides visible accountability that addresses congressional and public concerns about military readiness and security. And it creates space for new leadership to implement corrective actions without the institutional resistance that might come from leaders who designed or defended the failed security architecture. The strategic implications for American military posture across the Middle East extend far beyond the immediate security breach to affect deterrence, operational security, and the viability of forward deployed forces in contested regions. The fundamental strategic assumption underlying American forward presence is that bases provide secure platforms from which military power can be projected and sustained. When adversaries demonstrate that these bases are penetrable and that sensitive information about their security procedures and vulnerabilities can be collected, the secure platform assumption becomes questionable. The deterrence implications are significant because deterrence requires that adversaries believe American forces can effectively respond to aggression and that American military facilities are secure from attack or disruption. The successful Iranian infiltration demonstrates that American base security has exploitable weaknesses and that Iranian forces possess the capability and operational discipline to exploit those weaknesses. This demonstration undermines deterrence by suggesting that in any conflict, Iranian forces could conduct additional infiltrations or could exploit the intelligence collected during this operation to execute attacks against vulnerabilities that are now mapped and understood. The operational security implications involve the compromise of sensitive information about base layout, security procedures, and operational patterns that Iranian intelligence can now exploit for planning future operations. Every detail that the Iranian operatives observed and recorded is now available to Iranian military planners who would design attacks against American forces in any conflict scenario. The information includes optimal attack routes that avoid surveillance coverage, timing windows when security forces are transitioning between shifts and surveillance may be degraded, and physical vulnerabilities in perimeter barriers or facility construction that could be exploited for penetration or destruction. The force protection implications require immediate revision of security procedures across all American military installations in the Middle East and potentially globally. If Iranian forces successfully penetrated Al-Udeid, the assumption must be that they have attempted or will attempt similar operations against other American facilities. Every base in CENTCOM area of responsibility must conduct security reviews to identify and remediate the types of vulnerabilities that the Al-Udeid penetration exploited. These reviews will require significant resources and will identify necessary security enhancements that will cost hundreds of millions of dollars to implement. The alliance and partnership implications affect American relationships with host nations, including Qatar, which provides the land and partnership that makes Al-Udeid viable as an American military hub. The penetration occurred on Qatari territory and involved breaches of security procedures that Qatar shares responsibility for enforcing. The incident will strain the American-Qatari security partnership and will create pressure for Qatar to demonstrate improved security capabilities and commitment. It may also create diplomatic complications if the investigation reveals that the forged contractor credentials involved compromise of Qatari systems or nationals. Subscribe to this channel because in a world where adversaries successfully penetrate the most secure American military facilities, where security procedures designed to prevent kinetic attack prove inadequate against intelligence collection operations, where the difference between security theater and actual security is measured by whether adversaries can exploit the gaps. Analysis that examines these failures and their strategic implications is essential for understanding the actual state of American military readiness rather than the state that official assurances describe. So, Freener are Sakshirats. The technology and procedures that are being implemented to prevent future penetrations include enhanced biometric verification systems with liveness detection that can identify spoofed biometric data, continuous tracking systems that monitor contractor movements within base facilities and trigger alerts when individuals enter areas outside their authorized work scope, artificial intelligence-powered video analytics that can identify suspicious behavior patterns in real time rather than requiring human monitoring of all camera feeds, and enhanced counterintelligence screening of contractor personnel before access is granted. These technological solutions will improve security but cannot eliminate the fundamental tension between operational necessity and security requirements. American military installations will continue to require access by thousands of civilian contractors who perform essential support functions, and the volume of contractor movement will continue to create opportunities for adversaries to attempt penetration using forged credentials or compromised identities. The challenge is not to achieve perfect security, which is impossible in an operational environment, but to reduce the probability of successful penetration and to increase the probability of detection before adversaries can complete their intelligence collection objectives. The Iranian response to the public disclosure of this operation has been to neither confirm nor deny involvement, but to issue statements emphasizing that American military facilities throughout the Middle East are vulnerable to operations by regional forces that oppose American presence. These statements are carefully calibrated to claim credit for capability without providing details that would constitute admission of specific operations or that would reveal operational methods that Iran wishes to employ again in future operations. The propaganda value that Iran gains from this incident is substantial regardless of whether official acknowledgement occurs. The regional audience observes that Iranian forces successfully penetrated an American military installation and exfiltrated without apprehension, demonstrating operational capability and American vulnerability. The demonstration affects regional perceptions of the balance of power and of the viability of American military presence when that presence cannot guarantee security even within the perimeters of its own installations. The internal Iranian assessment of this operation will focus on validating operational procedures and identifying lessons that can be applied to future intelligence collection and direct action missions. The successful penetration demonstrates that the investment in Quds Force training and capability development is producing operationally effective forces that can conduct complex missions in denied environments. The intelligence collected will be analyzed and integrated into Iranian targeting databases that would guide operations in any conflict with American forces. Has this penetration permanently undermined American confidence in the security of forward-deployed bases and forced a fundamental reassessment of whether American military presence in contested regions can be sustained when adversaries can penetrate installations and collect intelligence about vulnerabilities? Or will enhanced security procedures and technology restore confidence that forward bases can be adequately protected against sophisticated adversaries? Can American-based security architecture adapt to threats that emphasize intelligence collection over kinetic attack, or will the operational requirements of large installations create persistent vulnerabilities that determined adversaries will continue to exploit? The answers will determine whether American forward presence remains viable or whether the geography of American military power must shift toward more distributed, harder-to-target configurations that sacrifice concentrated capability for reduced vulnerability. Your engagement keeps this analysis independent and uncompromising. This is what security failure looks like when professionals test it. This is what happens when assumptions about impenetrable bases encounter adversaries who study vulnerabilities while defenders assume strength. Stay sharp, stay ahead, and never stop demanding accountability for failures that official statements minimize while careers quietly end and procedures quietly change to address weaknesses that should never have existed.